Okay, welcome guys. So I was just thinking of making a public service announcement video or like a guide video for miners or video card enthusiasts who are thinking of changing your own thermal pads, because this is a 57 power color 5700 XT which I've been mining on, and I wanted to change the thermal pads to improve its thermal performance. So I actually went and bought some so-called premium thermal pads, like Thermalright thermal pads, which is like advertised to be 12.8 watts per meter Kelvin. And the purpose of the video is that please make sure that you measure your thermal pad sizes properly, because initially when I took out, these are the existing thermal pads on the 5700 XT, the power color 5700 XT, and I thought using my pair of vernier calipers, I thought they were 2.0 millimeters. So I replaced them with 2.0 millimeters pads here, which I've already taken out, and replaced everything, installed, and the graphic card managed to boot. So I managed to see the motherboard logo, which is for me is the Asus logo, because I was using an Asus motherboard. But the problem is that immediately after that, the video card would just turn off and shut down. So I thought I had bricked my video card in the process of changing the thermal pads. But instead, when I dismantled the video card again, what happened was that you could see there was very little thermal paste on the cooler side. And I had previously spread out the thermal paste like this, and you can see that it is still not compressed at all. Like the thermal paste is still undisturbed and it barely touched the cooler. So what I deduced is that I probably measured my thermal pad sizes wrongly. Like using 2.0 millimeters was too thick, and it blocked the cooler from touching the GPU die. And because the GPU die was overheating, it was not in contact with the cooler. So even though it managed to boot, when it was booting, it was beneath the thermal operating temperatures, the thermal limit, so to say. But once it got further in, obviously, since there's zero contact with the cooler, the GPU die overheated and it shut itself down. So now I'm hoping that to change it to the thinner thermal pads, maybe 1.5 millimeters, and I hope that the GPU die hasn't died. Okay, so I'm using this standard pair of vernier calipers to measure the thickness of these are the thermal pads that I took out from the Power Color 5700 XT, and as you can see here, so this is, as you can see, the longer, so the longer line, the first long line is 0.1 millimeters, and it goes halfway between, so it goes so each short line on the lower scale is 0.5 millimeters, and the longer line is 0.1 millimeters. So in this case, this should be 1.5 millimeters, because as you can see, the zero line corresponds with the second small line, which is 0.1 plus 0.05. Sorry, each short line is 0.05, and each longer line, taller line, is 0.1 millimeters. So in this case, this is 0.1 plus 0.05, so this is 0.15 millimeters. But as you can see, how I use the vernier calipers is so now I'm taking measurement of the same thermal pads, but this time, because I didn't really put pressure, like I didn't really clamp on the thermal pads hard enough. As you can see, the measurement here, it indicates 0.2 millimeters. So if I had actually just clamped it a little bit tighter, okay, let's see whether I can do it with one hand. Clamp it a little bit tighter, apply a bit pressure, make sure that it's clamped tight enough. It would show closer to 0.1, but of course it's a little bit difficult. So it's a little bit tricky when you're using vernier calipers to measure thermal pad thicknesses, because thermal pads are kind of squishy, they are compressible, or they can be compressed. So it's a bit hard to measure the exact size, but you gotta be really careful. Like you can't have too little pressure, or you might be taking the wrong measurements. If you are like me, taking measurements that are they are a bit bigger than their actual size, it could cause the problem of the GPU die not touching the cooler and the GPU die overheating, and your GPU either dying or just shutting down due to due to being overheated. Okay, so when you're screwing in uh, the die portion, because the GPU die is directly here, so when screwing the die portion, make sure you do what we call the cross method of tightening. That means I've put in these 4 screws here, but they have not been tightened yet, so they're still really loose. And once you've just put them in for like, just make sure they're secure, at least 1 to 2 threads. Then you want to cross tighten. That means you tighten this the adjacent one, like I turn it for half a circle, I turn this for half a circle, the one that is directly across from it, and then I'll go up to this, turn it half a circle, and then I'll tighten this half a circle, and I'll repeat the process, half a circle here, then half a circle here, and half a circle on the top corner, and half a circle on here, right? So why do we do this is because you want to have an even pressure on the cooler on the GPU die as you tighten. So you don't want to tighten this too much before tightening the other ones, because that would, for example, cause the cooler to be tilted, and you have uneven pressure on the GPU die, which could cause overheating problems again. So make sure you use this cross method when tightening sensitive components like GPU die or like the CPU cooler. Okay, so make sure that I'm repeating, so cross, so that it is as tight as I can go with my hands. This is already as tight as it can go with my hands. This is also tight as it can go, and this is as tight as it can go. Okay, so I've installed my Power Color Red Dragon 5700 XT into my test system, and this is the moment of truth. This is the first time I'm powering it on after I've changed I've changed the thermal pad thickness from 2.0 millimeters to 1.5 millimeters, and for the GDDR memories side, so I'm hoping this works, because previously I think I was using thermal pads that were 0.5 millimeters, 0.05 millimeters, I think, 0.05 millimeters too thick, and yeah, that was 1.5, 0.5 millimeters too thick, because it was from 1.5, it was from 2.0 mm down to 1.5 mm. So I think I might have been using thermal pads that is just 0.5 millimeters too thick, which caused the cooler to not touch the GPU die, and it caused it to overheat immediately after booting, and to immediately shut down. So let's see if this works. Okay, so let's look at the screen. So there's power to the screen. It means that it's booting, so it's promising. Okay, so you can see the motherboard logo, so that is some amount of promise. So previously, when it was my previous problem was that it immediately shuts down, doesn't even boot into Windows. Now it boots into Windows, and you have my anime girl pointing a middle finger at you. Yeah, for anyone's info, that's Sakura Miko. It's a VTuber, so I really like this wallpaper. But anyway, yeah, and let's check the temperature. So okay, so we detected AMD Radeon 5700 XT. Idle temps are at 35, so looking good. 37, 36, 35, 36, looking good. This is promising. And let's check. Can we see whether the GPU fans are spinning? GPU fans are not spinning. Okay, because I remember the Radeon software has has a oh no, let me just check. Let me check my Radeon software. Okay, Radeon software, it has a function whereby it stops the fans if it's idle. Okay, let me try it out. Manual fan tuning, advanced controls, fine tuning, fan speed. Anyway, temperatures look good, so seems to have worked. 38 degrees Celsius, and since it's able to be detected, now it doesn't shut down, so it seems to have worked. 1.5 millimeters for the thermal pad thickness for the memory instead of 2.0 millimeters seems to have worked well. Okay, that's all for the video. So for anyone who has problems like that means if your GPU seems to have that means you are afraid that you bricked your GPU. That means after you change your thermal pads, your GPU doesn't boot, or maybe it shows the motherboard logo, but you couldn't get it to boot into Windows. It keeps shutting down. So this may be the issue here. So hope this helps. Thank you very much. See you guys next time. Okay, so the Power Color 5700 XT, that means as you can see here, the AMD Radeon 5700 XT is currently running a benchmark on Horizon Zero Dawn. So I'm actually stress testing it. So previously I had changed the thermal pads. I tried changing the thermal pads, the original one with the so-called the premium ones, but I was using 2.0 millimeters and my GPU couldn't boot up. So after taking it out, I realized that there was no contact with the cooler and the GPU die because there was no smearing of thermal paste on the GPU cooler at all. So I thought my GPU die had died, but just needed to change it back down to 1.5 millimeters. As you can see, the GPU still works fine. It can complete a Horizon Zero Dawn benchmark, and the maximum temperature temps are 78 degrees Celsius. GPU temps maximum hit 74, but overall the GPU did not die, even though previously I was booting the GPU for actually a few times with where there was no contact between the GPU cooler and the GPU die because the thermal pads were 0.5 millimeters too thick and it obstructed, so it blocked the cooler from touching, and when I booted it up, the GPU die most probably instantly hit its thermal limit. It overheated and it shut down. So even though the GPU die had overheated, some users might be worried that your GPU could have burnt out, but that is not the case because modern GPUs actually are quite sophisticated. They have thermal protection inbuilt into the chip itself. So whenever if the temperature spikes up to a temperature that is close to burning themselves out, they would be shutting themselves. The chip is designed to shut themselves down so that they don't burn out. Hence, you can see that even though I booted a few times on my chip with no contact with the cooler, the GPU died. The GPU didn't die at all. So once I reduced the thermal pad thickness and the cooler was able to contact the GPU die, it was able to function just as well, right? Okay, so hope this video helps. Thank you very much and see you guys next time.